Good morning and welcome to the April 12th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting for the Lee Summit School District. We'll begin with item 1.01, contracts greater than $15,000. As a reminder, this list has new as well as renewals. Anytime there's a renewal item, we don't go into great detail on those topics, those agenda items, unless there's questions from board members or other folks. But on the new items, we will go into great detail. And so on this particular list, there are no renewals. Every item is new. And so as we go through the rest of the agenda, we will cover each of these items in greater detail. Moving on to, any questions on this list before we get started? Okay, so we will go, once again, we will go into greater detail on each of these items. Moving on to item 1.02, contracts $15,000 and less. First of all, any questions on any items that are on this list? They're pretty typical for this time of year. You'll see DJs for prom and end of the year activities. You'll see items preparing for next year, maybe software renewals, those type of purchases. So, but nothing out of the ordinary here. Trips, end of the year trips and activities for our activities and sporting events, sporting teams, once again, all pretty typical for what we would see this time of year. If there are any questions, we'll move on to item 1.03. Pura Zone and Hilliard. I'll turn this over to Ms. Battaglia.
Good morning. This is an inventory bid that we did for Universal Paper Products for paper towels and toilet paper for the dispensers across the entire district. We've done this bid many times, and we have standardized our dispensers with the Vondrell dispensers, which will hold a universal paper product. So that bid was put out. We received several bids, 5, I believe, and not every company bid on every item. So we did our evaluation with custodial and purchasing group. We tested the products, we requested samples, tested everything. And as it kind of came out, we decided that Pura Zone provided the best overall value for the paper products. And then the dispensers, we actually were able to purchase off of the interlocal purchasing contract, which we refer to as the TIPS contract. It's a cooperative contract, and Hilliard provides those dispensers that we have standardized throughout our district. And we are recommending that we award Hilliard the dispensers. Are there any questions? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 1.04, Intel Peer, Dr. Whaley, Kinsey. I'm not sure which of the two of you are going to cover this, but I'll let you take it from here.
Sure, I'll lead off, and both of us are available for questions. And so as we've been talking for the last couple of months, this is the next series of contracts up for consideration, this and the next item. So we'll just take one at a time. So this is for IntelliPeer. This is what provides outside dialing for all of our phone circuits. And we work with them, and we have to start this in May and June in order to give the proper lead times to move off our current vendor to the new. This company this service we've used at East Trails all year. It's worked out really well. So again, this is just part of the phone project scope. Any questions on that?
Dr. Whaley, I had just had the question, and you just mentioned, but I'd like to highlight again the overall timeline that you shared, the phone project timeline. This is a piece of that, so not an add-on, but just a piece of that overall $4 million.
Yes, and I believe I put a chart together and sent it to Linda. I think she's going to add that to the regular meeting documents, just kind of the timeline overview for tomorrow night, I believe.
I think that'll be really helpful, especially knowing we've got a lot of new board members coming on. That'll help them understand kind of where we've been and where we're going. That's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I can move on to the next one too. So phone system training, obviously training is going to be really important as we adopt a new phone system. We want to make sure our staff is ready to answer patron phone calls, especially during that back to school season where it's super busy. And some people might say, well, why do you need training to use a phone? And so really there's a lot of details with transferring calls and answering and parking and, placing people on hold and answering voicemail. So there's a lot of little details that will help. If we train properly, it'll make the transition a lot smoother for all of our end users. So this is the training package. It covers everyone, the entire staff, everyone from teachers to administrative assistants, and really just kind of goes through how to best use the phone system.
And you said this was not part of that original approval, correct? This is like an add-on?
This was in the original timeline that we've talked about. So yes, if I'm understanding your question.
Like in that total package that I'm pretty sure it was what we approved back in last month in March. So this is just a chunk of that, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think Dr. Whaley, you bring up a good point. Understanding all the value that this phone system brings and having that consistent training so that everybody understands, I think will be really beneficial. I think that's great.
Absolutely. And I would add too, just, if we have any new viewers tuning in this morning, not only are we, replacing existing phones that sit on desks, but we're also adding phones to every instructional space for safety and convenience. And then in addition to that, anybody with a voicemail, so teachers, administrative assistants, all of those users, they'll have access to what's called a soft phone, and they can use their computer, or they could even install an app on their personal cell phone, and they can make and receive phone calls as if they were within districts. So for instance, when teachers go home on an AMI day, they can use their computer to make and receive phone calls, and it will look like it's coming from their building. So it'll be a really nice set of features.
That's really great, Dr. Whaley. I just wanted to say that. I think that this is a really neat program. I think it's great that we're adding phones to all the classrooms, because I know that I've heard that as a concern from families who know that, but also our staff who are concerned when, not every building has a phone in their classroom to be able to call out for emergencies. So I appreciate this, and I think this is great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whaley. Moving on to item 1.06, the National School Public Relations Association Communication Audit. Ms. Bergen.
Good morning. How is everyone? I'm happy to tell you about National School PR Association Communications Audit. So a communications audit is really somewhat what it sounds like: an auditor coming in and evaluating our current communication and public relations strategy, both within the public relations department and throughout our communications program in the district, and also evaluating our future needs of our stakeholders. And so the National School PR Association is a organization that somewhat provides professional development and expertise to K through 12 public school districts. But what's unique about NSPRA is that they actually have national benchmarks for what makes an exemplary communications program in a K through 12 public school district. And so their audit is very much based on those benchmarks, and actually one of our own CSIP goals 3.1 action plan series is based on NSPRA rubrics. So first and foremost, a communications audit can serve as an accountability tool for some of our previous or current CSIP work as we get ready to go into a new CSIP cycle. It's pretty common for school districts to choose to do a communications audit when there's a leadership transition, either with the superintendent or the public relations director. The last time we did a communications audit in this school district is actually during the transition from 2 PR directors ago, from Janice Phelan to Kelly Wachel. So we actually haven't had a communications audit in the district since 2018. So communications audit in 2023 would be a direct reflection of some of the communication decisions and strategies that both myself as a new public relations director in the district have undertaken, but also for Dr. Buck, who's come into the district since there's been a communications audit. You know, a simple rationale is there's an audit is written into our CSIP as a requirement for 3.1 to serve as that accountability tool, but also to provide that sort of robust data and research that can ground communication practices and recommendations for our next CSIP cycle. So our next CSIP stakeholder group and the folks who work on that plan will have a really comprehensive report about communications in the district. What does the timeline look like, and what does the audit actually entail? The proposal is for the bulk of the work to occur between August and December with a comprehensive audit report with recommendations for next steps and best practices and things to implement to come to the board in December. What the audit will entail will be a review of all of our district materials and practices, whether it's the engagement work that we do, or it's a review of our actual newsletters, a review of our social media channels. The auditor comes in and looks at all of those things. It involves a scope survey, so a survey of our stakeholders about the perceptions of the district, what our stakeholders, both internal and external, feel our communication needs are. It involves 10 focus groups, including the Board of Education, and we can kind of choose our own adventure when it comes to those focus groups. So we could choose to have elementary parents, middle school parents, high school parents, a community group, administrators, SLT, the board, and we can work through those details as we work through with the auditor. It also involves an interview with the superintendent, an interview with the PR director, and an interview with the PR team outside without the inclusion of the PR director. And those three components come together. It's about a 10-week process, and then the auditor takes some time to deliver that report. My recommendation would be to have that to the Board of Education for the December 2023 meeting. Assumed that this board would value an on-site, in-person presentation so that the board could ask questions of that auditor about their process and have them in the room with them. Happy to answer any other questions about communications audits or this particular process.
I think, we know one of the tenets of board work and focus is around two-way communication with all the stakeholders. So I'm really excited to see this next step, and I'll be really excited to see then the outcomes from the audit and just all of the opportunities that are there. So this is pretty exciting. We're putting that committee together to really focus on some work related to the Missouri statutes and things in the near term. But then I think that just builds then to the outcomes from this audit. So it's just going to get better and better, Katie. So I'm really excited to see this audit.
Thank you, Board Member Campbell.
I agree. I think that this is going to be a really good thing, and I really appreciate that this is the recommendation and the direction that we as a district want to go, because I definitely hear that from community members with regard to disconnects and concerns about how we're able to have that back and forth between the district and community, parents, whatever stakeholder group. So I love this. I have one ask or question. I'm not really sure. So in some of the things that we have done as a district where it's involved stakeholder participation, it seems sometimes that the people that we are bringing into those focus groups are maybe recommendations from the buildings, which can be fine. But I also think that might, how do I put this, present maybe a certain direction that it gives the perception that it's not just I raise my hand and I would like to participate, so I get to participate, more of kind of like a cherry picking, for lack of a better word. And I don't know who selects the participants, but I would love to hear about that part, and also just have that comfort that when we are selecting these focus groups, that they are truly a representation, a broad representation of background, thought process, ideology, all of the different diverse groups that we can get. So that's my only comment, ask, question, if you will.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that, and also just take feedback as we if we move forward in the process, about how to go about that. I think we've done it in various different ways, and maybe not necessarily in consistent ways when we've picked committees. We certainly have taken, for some things, principal recommendations. We've had application processes. I think some of our processes have run the gamut. I'm going to jump and foreshadow a little bit, so I'm going to kind of go out of my lane, but I think this will help answer your question. One of the things that Dr. Shelton and Dr. Barger and I have been collaborating really closely on is we are going to have significant opportunity for public engagement for our public this fall. We had really robust surveying during the pandemic, and then it's been a little bit of a cooling off period, and we're kind of about to tick up into some really important processes with our CSIP work, with Dr. Shelton's CFMP work, and some of the engagement he plans to do with bond projects. Obviously, what we need to do for MSIP 6 and CSIP combined with this communications audit, it's a lot. We are very excited to collaborate together to really communicate with our community. Like, there's some really big pieces coming up and we want your involvement. So I don't have all the specific answers today, but I know Dr. Shelton and Dr. Barger and I are collaborating on a marketing plan, if you will, about how do we make sure that it is on everyone's radar, that we're hosting engagement around these three important processes, and we want your participation, because a lot of these pieces also require feedback, not just from our direct school community, but the larger community. So we're talking about strategies for that, but hearing that a priority would be to make sure that the opportunities to participate are very public and posted and communicated often. I'm happy to implement that, and I believe that's probably already part of our plans. We're going to tick up on some of the decision making in the next couple of months. I know Dr. Shelton is kind of working on finishing some things with the CFMP engagement piece.
Yes, thank you, Katie. As part of that process to reach out to a very broad audience, there will be an open application opportunity on our website that anyone in our community, any stakeholder from anywhere within our district could apply to serve on any of these committees, focus groups, and a variety of manners. I think the key is, and Katie spoke to this, marketing. How do we get that opportunity into the hands of people who really don't necessarily maybe go to our website on a regular basis, or maybe who aren't engaged with our school district on a regular basis, and how do we get that out to the public? And it's just going to be, as Katie has mentioned, marketing, communication, getting it, in front of our civic groups, in front of our faith-based organizations, and just letting them know, hey, here is an opportunity to partner with the district in these areas.
I think that's great. Thank you both. I'm really excited for this. I fully support it. I'm looking forward to going through this process with the district. So this is awesome.
Thank you, Alex Eslick.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1.07. Ms. McMillan, turn it over to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So the district's current employee assistance, or EAP, contract with Empathia expires June 30th. So we have recently gone through that RFP process. So our current EAP program is available to all benefit eligible employees, including their family members. So it does include 6 no-cost counseling visits per year per issue. There are a lot of work-life resources. We have legal and financial consultation. We also get 40 hours of on-site support with our EAP program, and that can be used for coming on site and doing well-being trainings, or responding to critical incidences, which we have experienced quite a few this year. So the examples can include there's been a death of a student, and we want to get support there for our staff. There's been the death of an employee. we get EAP there to help support our staff at that time. So really, EAP is, like I like to call it, a life management support service for our employees to really help provide them with a balanced, I like to call, life workflow. It's kind of that new term that we're using out there. So based upon the RFP's team's evaluation, we looked at the proposals, the services, the presentations, the financial costs, and reference checks. The team is recommending that we use personal assistant services, or PAS, for EAP services beginning July 1st. So PAS does provide all of the services that Empathia currently provides, plus some additional services that the team felt were definitely valuable. So PAS has guaranteed the rate of $1.87 per employee per month for 3 years. That is reflected in the contract. Our current rate that we're paying with Empathia is $240 per employee per month. So this will result in a savings to fiscal year 24, the employee benefits budget, of about $16,394. So it's not very often we can present an insurance or a benefits plan with the savings to the district. So the team is excited about building our partnership with PAS, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for all your hard work with this program, both finding a program that is beneficial to our employees and also working to save the district money. So appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It's apparent through our utilization that our staff take full advantage of this. We have one of the highest utilizations in the country. And it's a great resource for our staff. I want to thank Ms. McMillan and also Ms. Battaglia and both your teams for leading this process of taking this out to market and really bringing back some wonderful results for our staff. Moving on to item 1.08, special warranty deed. In February 2022, the board entered into an agreement with the City of Lee Summit and DTLS Apartments, which are the apartments in downtown Lee Summit. It's associated with a parking lot that's at 107 Southeast Douglas Street. It's a small parking lot right across the street from the apartments. It's also borders Lee Summit Elementary. It's also connected with the interchange work that's going to be done at 50 Highway and 291. So this is, I'll say, the final step in this process where we take full possession of that parking lot. The reason the apartment complex is involved in this agreement is that part of the parking lot, I think maybe 6 parking spots, will be designated for the apartment building's use for potential tenants to park as they come in and talk to management. So anyway, this is just the final step in the process. This is a project that's been assisted by Chinnery law firm. Casey Crawford has helped us in this process. And so Dr. Buck has signed the deed. It's now in the hands of the city, but it will come before the board tomorrow night for ratification. Any questions? All right, thank you. Moving on to item 1.09, Strategos International. Turn it over to Ryan Hall. I believe he's on the call.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. I've been having some technical difficulties, so I appreciate it. Yeah, so this is in 2013 or through 2015, we initiated an active shooter training within our schools. And at the time we bid Strategos International, we decided to do a train-the-trainer model where we trained our own staff and law enforcement to go into our schools and train our staff. We've been doing that for the last 7, potentially 8 years now. Based on board policy, that contract has come to an end, and so we've had to rebid. So we sent this out to bid, and we got multiple feedback or bids to come back. We asked for multiple different types of training. We wanted to see how much it would cost to have the company come in and train our staff versus continuing the train-the-trainer model. As you can see, we did decide to go with the train-the-trainer model, not just from a cost-effective perspective, but also we felt it was more, our focus group decided that it was more intimate to our community. It involved people that we knew, LSPD, our own staff. So in that bid process, we narrowed it down to 2 companies, Strategos and one of the other ones. And then after review of all the materials, we felt consistency. They were both very similar. The issue between the other company and Strategos was the other company was from Virginia, so there was a lot of hidden travel costs and things that weren't necessarily in the bid. But also, we felt consistency with Strategos to continue that process. So the recommendation that we're bringing to the board is to continue that process with Strategos International, do the train-the-trainer model for a extended 5-year contract with an additional, I think there's 3-year options, 3 one-year options after that.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any questions?
I know Dr. Shelton and Ryan, you guys answered my questions in board questions, but just, you know, as the public hears and the community hears about money in the state budget being allocated for school safety, are we planning to use some of those funds for this, or are those funds kind of earmarked for other safety opportunities in our district?
That's a great question. So yeah, so we have the application that we entered was for 3 projects. One was adding an emergency communication app within the district. The second project was to upgrade all of our video entry systems at all of our schools. And the third was to add security or shatterproof glass or bullet resistant glass to main entryways, to upgrade the main entryways within our district, utilizing those materials. We did not include Strategos training. The grant from the state is a single-year grant. So once the money is dispersed, you have a year to spend it. So we kind of felt that because this was an ongoing process, we would probably want to look for our internal or budgetary funding for this and use the grant request for larger one-time projects.
That makes great sense. Thank you. Thanks for walking through that.
You're welcome.
Associated with that grant, our hope is that the $50 million grant that is in the state budget for similar school safety initiatives will be passed. And so right now, the allocation that Lee Summit has is about $900,000 for, out of this current grant that the state has put forward, which is a $20 million grant. So
yeah, and if approved, and we're hopefully we get approved for that.
Exactly.
I learned from CES yesterday that over 500 school districts applied for this. So at minimum, we're showing the state that this money is needed to be year after year for this
Right.
type of grant.
Is this, excuse me, well, words, goodness. Is this grant an all or nothing? Like, if you submitted for these 3 things, do they all have to get approved, or can the state come back and say, well, you asked for this much, but we're going to give you this much? Is that possible?
So I would assume it is possible, because we did do it by project. We didn't do one different, we just put in, this is what we're requesting and this is how much each project is. But because this is fairly new and we haven't been awarded it yet, I can't confirm that.
Okay, I was just curious, like if they give you a lump sum, if there was like a priority, but it sounds like since they're individual projects, one could get denied and the other 2 could get approved, and there's not really a, this is our number 1 top priority. So that's all I was kind of curious about. Thanks.
We're very optimistic that that we get approved for everything, though.
I hope so.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Appreciate it. Moving on to section 2, facilities. 2.01 Benchmark Incorporated. Mr. Gurrell.
Thank you. Today I'm here to present a contract for Benchmark Roofing. And what the district has a current on-call contract with Benchmark as our roof consulting and observation consultant. And the contract will take care of our next project, which deals with most of B building at Lee Summit High School and Mason. And this is just the design contract to execute that project that will take place next summer. And I know some people may ask, well, how, Lee Summit High and Mason, those, were the bond projects that two of the big bond projects we just finished. And our roof plan, it just kind of timed out this way. We've got a separate prioritized list. And, if we would have incorporated these projects into the bond projects, they would have gotten done, probably 3 to 4 years before really their planned place in our long range capital plan. So in the last few years, we've roofed Westview, Hazel Grove. We're working on Lee Summit West right now. And we also, after taking on Paradise Park, we've re-roofed Paradise Park too. So it's really just a timing thing. And also the complexity of those projects, we felt like adding on another layer on top of it would have just been a lot to ask. So this contract is for $101,500. I will say that Benchmark in their contract with us for a project of this size could be a 3.25% fee. And if you take the estimate for this project, it's about 141,000 square foot of roofing. And our current pricing that we're seeing right now could be anywhere from $32 to $35 a square foot. So this could be around a $5 million project, which would put their fee far below that 3.25%. So, we appreciate them acknowledging that they can do this work. The cost of construction and that percentage, shouldn't just be an opportunity for them to make more money on that. I did also want to take the opportunity to answer a question that just recently came from the board about cost escalation. And so we planned for cost escalation in our first round of contracts that we've handled through the pandemic. And to do that, we built in an allowance, which is just a dollar figure that's placed in the contract that's based on whatever the current escalation rate is multiplied by the length of the contract. So the contractor, when he bids the project, submits a certified receipt of his materials. And then if he can show us later on when the materials are actually ordered, if there was an increase, he can apply the allowance to that. Any unused money would be returned back to the district. But this does allow the contractors the ability to have that comfort level of going ahead and bidding a project, knowing that it doesn't happen for almost another year, and that there's not risk in that crazy escalation world that's out there. So are there any questions I can answer about this contract?
I think I might have misread this contract or this particular line item. So this is just for design, not for the actual execution. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So when I talk about it tomorrow at the board meeting, I don't, misrepresent what this is.
Right. Yes, this is just a design contract. They will be acting as our engineer of record on the project.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll move on to the next item, and it's the bond budget update. And this month, I do not have any updates. The budget update is largely unchanged from last month, but I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have them. All right. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you so much. Moving on to section 3, finance, Mr. Holder.
All right, do you want me to take this one, Dr. Shelton?
Yes, please.
The ballot inquiry. Okay. So the first thing that we will have on our board agenda under finance, we have the normal 2 transfer of funds and report and payment of bills, but we also will take this opportunity to certify the election results. We will also have, of course, the election results that you'll certify later in the meeting for the election of the board members. But this is specific to the levy. So as we all know by now, just over 10,000 yes votes, 4,179 no votes. So almost a 71% approval rating, which I think we were all very pleased with, especially, in this time of asking anytime you have a ballot question, and we all know that the links that we went to explain why the ballot language was the way that it is. Very pleased with the outcome. So this is just again, something that anytime you have a ballot issue and or you're electing new board members, this is something that the board will do. Any questions on that?
Nathan, if I could just go a little deeper with what is provided here. So you'll see attached the KC, Kansas City election summary. It's unofficial. Obviously, we'd have Jackson County and Cass County. We haven't been provided those yet, but we've pulled these numbers that are represented from those other election board sites. And so once again, these are, I'll say, unofficial from these election boards, but we're confident in the overall outcome of the election.
Okay. The next item that we have is our transfer of funds. This month, if you remember last month, we had a very small transfer amount, which was really unusual, but that was just due to the state payment from our early childhood special education funds. This year, the state brought those all, or they released all those at one time. Typically, they do that over the course of several months. So this month is back to a more normal level for this time of year. So our transfer will be $4,632,665.85 from the general fund to the special revenue fund for this month. All right, so then we get into our treasurer's report and the monthly finance and expense report. I'm sorry, revenue and expense report. And this is the time of year. It's the end of March is what this report reflects. And so we're looking at 3/4 of the way through the year, which for our purposes here in the school district is a very significant milestone, primarily because almost all of our local revenue that we have anticipated coming in, we have received. Now we will continue to receive local revenue. We get that every week from Jackson County, every month from Cass County, and that will continue to come in through the end of June. However, we have received the bulk of that. So as you look at our, starting with the revenue and our operating fund, again, we've received almost 95% of what we would anticipate in Fund 1 in our operating. And that tracks very closely to where we were at this point last year. I would, just remind everyone that when we did our amendment in February, we made an adjustment in Fund 1, a positive adjustment in revenue. Part of that was related to increased interest earnings. And so that is reflected here. And so that's the bulk of the reason why you see just a little bit of a difference compared to last year. But again, a lot of that as well is just timing of receipts when we receive those. So we feel very good about where we're at with just over 7 million left in Fund 1 to realize what we would have budgeted for this fiscal year. Again, special revenue. This is a little different. This is Fund 2. This is primarily, these funds come from the state in the forms of basic formula, classroom trust fund, as well as our Prop C, which is considered local revenue, but it's based on a statewide sales tax. And so those will come in again in typically with the formula, those are more equal payments. And so that's why you see that number closer to 75%, because we're, again, 3/4 of the way through our fiscal year. You can see we're a little bit above where we were last year from a percentage standpoint. I would also mention that with those Fund 2 dollars, the state is still, DESI is not fully funding the formula where we anticipate it will be. We're not worried that they won't do that. It's just their typical practice the last several years has been to not give that full amount until we get to June. And so it's not unusual for them to hold back just a little bit. 10 years ago, when, it's getting closer to 15 now, when the state had to withhold money at the end of the year, DESI kind of instituted that practice of not giving everybody everything up front that they was projected to be, just to be a little bit more conservative there. Debt service, again, continues to outperform our budgeted amounts. Again, this is really primarily interest, even on just over 30 million. When you're getting interest rates close to 5%, that helps. And so that will continue to help this fund. That's also a reflection of strong local tax collection this year. We're fortunate in Jackson County. It's a pretty high percentage compared to some of our peers around the state in terms of what should be collected in a fiscal year actually gets collected. Bond funds, again, strong reflection. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to the balance sheet. Capital projects a little bit above. And so in total, again, we're looking at in a very good, strong fiscal position at this point in the year. Food service, again, as you look at comparison to last year, obviously our budget is a little bit lower on the revenue side this year because of the, not having the everybody free reimbursement from the federal government. But again, tracking right where we would anticipate it to be. Same with activities in our foundation as well as BASS. We would anticipate our BASS revenue will probably beat that estimate just a little bit, I think, of the $2 million. But again, if you look at it on a 3/4 basis, we're just above 75% there in what we've received year to date. Moving down to expenses. Fund 1, again, operating and really Fund 2. When you look at both of those items, you compare it to last year, we're just under 1%. In terms of a comparison, I feel good about where we're at in both operating and special revenue fund. Again, operating, much more of those expenses follow the fiscal year calendar. And so when you see that that is under 75%, that's a good sign because we've already completed 3/4 of the fiscal year. Special revenue is below 70. That's at 68.24. That's again a good sign. And keep in mind, the reason that that does not track is the same as operating is that in our Fund 2 special revenue, teacher paychecks that go out in July are reflected in this fiscal year. And so we're essentially a month behind with those as it's reflected on our expenses. And so we have to account for that. And so that's why that number is not closer to 75%. It basically reflects a month of those teacher salary payrolls. Debt service, again, keep in mind that escrow payment was made this year. But again, we're tracking very well in our debt service, and I'll speak to that again, looking at our balance sheet. Bond funds, we continue to spend. March was a pretty light month in terms of our billing from our contractors. We did make some payments there, but we still have just over $50 million in our bond fund that is remaining to be spent. And then capital projects, you can see that's tracking very closely to where we were, again, from a percentage standpoint at this time last year. Moving through over to the right with our restricted funds, nutrition services, again, looking very good, 80%. That's right where we would anticipate it to be at this point in the year. Remember, food, we're always ordering that a few weeks ahead. So that is, in a sense, a little bit more real-time expense there. activities, foundation expenses, right where we would expect it to be. A little bit higher, but again, that's just a reflection of, this school year. Thankfully, we are, in really a mode that we haven't seen since the 1920 school year in terms of all the activities and things that our kids have been able to do. We are much more back to a normal process there. So I think that 85% is really reflective of where we would be. And then before and after school services, again, that's tracking right where we would anticipate. Again, our monthly expenses there are pretty low. We've already had the true up that was reflected at the end of December. So I think our budget number there is pretty good. And we'll watch that as it comes in April and May, but I think that's overall a pretty good number. Going down to the bottom again, restricted funds, very strong in all areas. Before and after school services, I just want to mention, we have that negative balance there, but that did improve just over $40,000 from last month. We will continue to see that improve through June. And so again, I think our BAS budget numbers are relatively pretty consistent. We may have, I'm sure we'll have a slight adjustment in June, but I wouldn't anticipate it to be anything large, and we'll continue to trend in the right direction. Going bottom left, again, our current fund balance, as has been reflected most months this year, we're running very well. And as a comparison to last year, just over 3% difference when you look at what our operating fund reserve would be. We're in a strong position. Any questions on the finance revenue and expense report for the month of March? All right. Next will be our investment report. There's really not a lot that has changed from this report. I will point out if you look at the very top, I apologize for this is smaller than usual. We'll get that corrected next month. You do see some CDs that actually came off at the end of March. We left those on there because we invested in a treasury that was close to 5%. It did not close until April 3rd. So we felt it was best to leave those on there with their maturity dates at the end of March. And then, of course, you'll see those come off in April. But just wanted to highlight there, if you look at those rates of those CDs, most of those were purchased in 20 or 21. Quite a difference from where they were to what we are able to reinvest in now. So if you scroll down to the bottom there, Hannah, I just want to point out one other thing. On our liquid rate, you see 4.63. That's already up. Remember, there was some movement in March with the quarter point raise of the Fed. That's up to just over 4.8% right now in our liquid. We continue to look at term, but the difference between our liquid rate and what the short-term rates are is just, it's very marginal. And so I anticipate, I still think we'll do some term investing with our regular fund, which is up at the top in our MOSIP and MOCAT repurchase. But with bond, if we do a short term, it will be a very, very short term, because really, again, it's just a marginal rate that we would be able to get. And so we continue to look at that. And as each month, you may see a small term investment there into the bonds. But when you're getting 4.8%, it's hard to beat that in liquid funds. Any question on the investments? All right, the last item is our balance sheet. And this is just two items that I wanted to point out here. If we look under the debt service column, you can see that we're at 31.159 million. That is, again, a stronger position than we anticipated. When you look back at what Stifel's projected, that number will continue to improve this year, because we basically have made all of our debt service expenses. There might be a fee of $500 or something that comes out between now and June, but really we've made all the payments. And so that 31.159 with interest rates will bump that number up. So again, I think when you look back at some of the Stifel projections, we were just under 31 million, in between 30 and 31. And so again, we continue to be in our strong position with our debt service fund. Even looking ahead, next year we have some 5% coupons. Everything else is below that, but we have some 5% coupons that are becoming callable next year. And so we are going to look to retire those early. We'll save the district quite a bit of money potentially. And so we're already looking forward to a plan late next fall to institute that. That's a result of having a healthy debt service fund balance. So that's a good thing. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is under the bond capital fund. Go down to the bottom, look at that 50.921 million. That I wanted to just highlight that number. If you look at Kyle's bond report, and if you take what our budget is, the 261,500,000, and you subtract what we've spent, you'll see a difference there of about $70,000. And that's a very positive thing because in essence, we have already closed that gap. And in April, we will go above that amount, which essentially means that I feel very comfortable that number will be 262 million. And it will even be higher than that by the time we get to the end of this, hopefully by December. Our projects will be complete, or at least there'll be a very, very small amount that would be left. But overall, that's a very good position that we're in. And we have already come very close to getting that 261,500,000 mark. And in April, we will eclipse that. And so anything that we have, and obviously those bond funds go down each month, which is good because that means we're getting projects done. But what is left will still generate some pretty good interest, at least for the next 4 or 5 months. So I just wanted to highlight that. And that's all I had on the balance sheet. Is there anything else or any other questions?
Mr. Holder, would you update the committee on where we are in the budget process?
Yes, certainly. So we have met with all of our buildings for the budgeting process. We just started last week and continue this week with the zero-based budgeting process for our departments. And we are starting, with that information, then we are definitely at the point where we're starting to build the budget for 23-24 with the ballot issue passing last week, as well as the approval of the salary recommendations. That's a huge part of our budget. So that allows us to get that into the budget. Remember, that's, over 80% of what we budget for. So once we get that set, really in our budget, when you look in terms of operating, you've got salaries and benefits, you've got the building and department budgets. And that's really it, other than at the district level, we're budgeting for utilities, transportation. There are different parts of that budget. But once we get that salaries and benefits piece, that's the largest part, and everything else kind of falls into line. The revenue side, we continue to monitor that. That's pretty set what the state believes that we'll have for the basic formula next year. Some of the things, that could possibly happen in Jefferson City with the legislative session, most of that would not go into effect until 24-25. Whether that be with the formula or with local taxes. And so we feel pretty good. We're in a pretty good space with our budgeting process. That will really heat up as we get into May, early June, and as we get ready for that June board meeting where we do 2 really big things. We approve an end of year budget for this fiscal year, and then we will be approving next year's final budget. But overall, we're in a very strong position as a district, and I feel good about where we're at this time.
Thank you. I've had an opportunity to sit in on a number of the budget meetings that Mr. Holders held with our department and building leaders, and it's a very thoughtful process. And our budget leaders at the building level and at the department level come to the meetings well prepared, and oftentimes they'll bring maybe their financial administrative assistant with them to give some insight as well. So it's been a good process. All right, moving on to section 4, future agenda items. We began this agenda item last month, and we're not going to go through these in detail, but this is just an effort on our part to, I'll say, prime the pump, if you will, for our board members and our committee to know that, there are agenda items coming. Oftentimes when agenda items come to the finance committee or come to the board, the administration has been working on these items for a number of months. And so as we look ahead, look around the corner to see what's coming, these are some of the items that we see coming to the finance committee and coming to the board. So we just want to put this in front of you, really, and ask you if you have any questions, but really just to let you know that these are the things that we're working on for the upcoming meetings.
Dr. Shelton, I don't have any questions about these, but I just love that you've started to do this. And I think it'll be great because that does kind of set board members up for success to be thinking about what's coming in the future, what questions do we have, and that kind of thing. So just appreciate this forward-looking view.
And at any time, if there's an item on this list that you, even before we present it, you maybe have questions about or processes that we're following, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask those questions. So
I also really like that we're doing this because I would have one that I think would be worth some, at least for now, one that I think would be worth some engagement before the MOU comes up, which is the YMCA contract, simply because we've gotten a lot of, I've gotten some feedback via email as a board member from constituents, parents, family members who are using YMCA, and they have also experienced what it was like to have BAS when we ran our own program. So there are some things that have been communicated that those family members aren't really in favor of, and they're asking, why are we doing this? So it would probably be good to better understand what the feedback is from parents and, why we are continuing down this path. Just, some of those details that would be helpful ahead of that decision.
very good. So what I would ask is, as we look forward, and I'm just processing here with the committee, how do we go about taking your questions that you have on these topics, and how then can we respond and provide that to you? So possibly, and I'll just throw this out to you two and any of the committee members, possibly we should have, just like we have with board meeting questions, maybe as you have questions about items that are on this list, that you could pose those questions to us and we can start to work on those and get that information to you.
Sure.
Sure.
One other thing that might be helpful to have on that list is a timeline. Then we might know, okay, this is coming,
Great.
in 6 months or next month, that way we could prioritize that urgency of, okay, I need to look at this and formulate my questions on this first. And then I know, because on the list, obviously YMCA is kind of down there, but is that because it's under your name and that's how it's organized, or, you know what I mean? So that might be another helpful column to have on this.
Sure. That's important information. That's a great point. And so I'll work with Ms. Pruitt. She's the one that pulls this information together. We'll add that column as I'll say the anticipated date that it will come before the board. So that'll be helpful. Thank you. Good evening.
Okay.
All right. If there aren't any further questions, I do want to close out by saying, Board President Campbell, thank you. Thank you for your leadership on this committee. Thank you for your insight, your eye for detail, your systems mindset, the lens of transparency that you expect out of us and that our community expects out of us as administration. and you have served us well. And so I just want to really say thank you, and we appreciate all that you've done.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shelton. And I'll just share, I want to share a thanks to every single person on your team, because when you've heard me say in multiple meetings, I rely on experts, you all are the experts in your area, and you work so hard for this district and to ensure that every dollar we spend, every dollar we take in, and every dollar we spend is in service to our students. Right. And I have come to rely on you so much around that transparency, around that accountability, and at every turn you've graciously answered questions. You've dug in and provided information. And I just can't say thank you enough. You've helped me be a better board member, and you certainly serve our district very well every single day. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I concur. We have a wonderful team. We are very fortunate, surrounded by very skilled and knowledgeable professionals in their field, and we have just a great opportunity to serve our students and staff and our community at a very high level.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.